So Valve has just published a Steam year in review on the Steamworks developer blog. It's not really meant for players, it's actually written for developers, but if you read through it, it ends up being one of the best snapshots of where PC gaming is heading. The 2025 report is interesting because it shows three big areas where Valve spent most of their efforts last year: hardware, the Steam store itself, and developer tools. And while none of this is exactly news, most of it happened throughout the year, but seeing everything together paints a pretty clear picture of what Steam is trying to do long term and where PC gaming is heading. And honestly, the scale of the platform right now is kind of insane. So without further ado, let's break it all down. 5 years ago, Steam first crossed 25 million concurrent users. In 2025, the platform reached 42 million people online at the same time. Just think about that for a second. I'm actually curious, how often do you open Steam in a typical week? Is it always on, or is it something you watch every day, or mostly when a new game releases and when you intend to play? Let me know in the comments, because I always find it interesting how different people use the platform. So 42 million players online at the same time, that's a growth of about 3.5 million additional concurrent players every year. And all of those players are downloading a ridiculous amount of data. In 2024, Steam delivered about 80 exabytes of downloads, and in 2025 that number climbed to 100 exabytes, which is such a huge number it's almost meaningless, but Valve broke it down just for fun. On average, Steam users are downloading about 190,000 gigabytes every single minute. So when Valve talks about improving discovery, downloads, or infrastructure, it's happening at a truly massive scale. But the report itself focuses on the three main areas: hardware, the Steam store, and developer tools. The hardware section of the report actually starts way back in 2013, when Valve first started experimenting with bringing PC gaming into the living room. Back then, the idea was simple: PC games on the couch with a controller. But at the time, there were some pretty big problems. The first iteration of Steam Machine was a massive failure. Linux compatibility was limited, Proton didn't even exist yet, and Valve was still figuring out how to build hardware products. Fast forward to today and things look very different. Proton now allows thousands of Windows games to run on Linux and on SteamOS, often without developers needing to do anything at all, and millions of players, especially Steam Deck users, have helped refine the experience of navigating Steam with a controller. Valve also points out that each piece of hardware they've released over the years has been part of that learning process. So the original Steam controller, the Steam Link, the Valve Index, and of course the Steam Deck. All those experiments led to the hardware announcement we saw in 2025. The redesigned Steam controller is meant to support the entire Steam library with features like capacitive thumbsticks, trackpads, and gyro aiming, and because it's built around Steam input, developers can create custom control profiles for the games, and that works across both the controller and the Steam Deck. Then there's the return of the Steam Machine. The original idea didn't really land a decade ago, but the environment today is completely different. Thanks to Proton and SteamOS, the game library that works on Linux is dramatically larger than it used to be. So the new Steam Machine is essentially a very powerful PC designed specifically for living room gaming. Valve says it has over 6 times the power of the Steam Deck. It's designed like a console, but it still keeps the openness of a regular PC, meaning players can install other stores, other operating systems, or just use it like a normal computer. It doesn't have to be a living room thing, even though it's designed like that. When Valve talks about the Steam Machine coming back, it raises an interesting question. Do you actually want a living room PC again? Do you think devices like the Steam Deck already solve that problem? Do you need another one? Let me know in the comments below. The third piece of the hardware is of course the Steam Frame, a wireless VR headset with its own onboard processing. It can run standalone experiences, but it can also connect to a PC or a Steam machine for more demanding games. You can play VR games on it or non-VR games on it. It's honestly a lot. So the overall goal of Valve is pretty clear: build an ecosystem where PC games can be played anywhere, handheld, in the living room, or in VR. And another milestone mentioned in the report, SteamOS has finally shipped as the default operating system on a non-Valve hardware device. In the middle of 2025, Lenovo released the Legion Go OS running SteamOS out of the box, which suggests that Valve is slowly pushing SteamOS beyond just their own devices and they want to release it as a standalone SteamOS so anybody can use it. The second major focus of the year was the Steam store itself, and if you've used Steam for a long time, you know that discoverability has always been one of the biggest challenges. Trying to find a game that is really what you're looking for has been really hard. There are simply so many games releasing every year. So Valve spent a lot of time improving how players actually find and learn about games. Some of the updates were fairly small, but together they add up. For example, the daily deal system was expanded, so more games can be featured on the front page, and that meant more developers getting exposure. And Valve is reporting that the overall daily deal revenue increased dramatically over the year. The discovery queue also received a cleaner interface and better context for recommendations. Instead of just showing random titles, it highlights things like what your friends are playing, or games similar to the ones that you own, or titles already on your wish list. Another interesting addition is the Steam Personal Calendar, which tracks upcoming releases based on the games you've wishlisted, or the developers you follow, or the games you've played before. So if you've ever forgotten about a game you were excited for months earlier, the calendar helps keep track of it. Discoverability is honestly one of the biggest problems on Steam right now. Thousands of games release every year, and a lot of them don't ever get found. So I'm curious, how do you personally find new games? Do you rely on the discovery queue? Do you rely on friend recommendations or YouTube, just scrolling the store? Do you use any external tools? Let me know in the comments. Valve also continued leaning heavily into the themed sale events and festivals, which have become regular marketing moments throughout the year. These events don't just promote existing games, they're also often used by developers to run playtests or demo new projects. And alongside these discoverability changes, one of the goals Valve highlights in the report is helping players quickly understand what the game offers. There's also a lot of new accessibility features added to Steam, pretty much allowing developers to clearly list options like color alternatives, text-to-speech, or touch-only input, and players can now filter games by accessibility as well. The store layout has also changed with something Valve calls Wide Store, which makes better use of the screen space, allows for larger images and cleaner trailer viewing. Speaking of trailers, the video player itself was rebuilt, and Valve actually had to re-encode over 400,000 trailers across the entire platform to improve playback quality and reduce bandwidth usage. Another interesting change this year was language-specific review scores. Valve noticed that review sentiment could vary dramatically depending on language and regions, so games with enough reviews now show ratings tailored to specific languages, which gives players a more relevant overview of how a game is being received in their own community. And finally, there were improvements to how bundles are displayed and suggested. For example, if you add a game to a cart but there is a bundle that gives you a better price, Steam will now automatically point that out. It's a small change, but it builds trust with users. The final section of the report focuses on tools for developers. Many of these changes are behind the scenes, but they still affect how games are marketed and managed on the platform. Valve improved store page editing tools, added visual editors for Steam events, and introduced better systems for managing images and artwork. We don't get to see a lot of that behind the scenes as players, but for developers, this is huge. Steam events themselves have become extremely important for marketing the game, and in 2025 developers published over 436,000 events for their games. These events have generated more than 3 billion player views. Valve also expanded on playtesting tools, allowing developers to reset test groups or let players invite friends into playtests, but probably the most significant addition is the new sales data API. This allows studios to automatically pull detailed information about sales, wishlists, activations, and regional performance. In other words, developers now have much more detailed data about how their games are performing across the platform. Valve also added new reporting tools for analyzing discounts and promotions, helping studios understand how different price strategies affect sales. And finally, there is a new in-game performance monitor. This tool shows detailed metrics like CPU usage, GPU load, or RAM usage and frame rate data, which can help both developers and players optimize performance. Something I find interesting here is how many of these improvements are small quality of life changes. They're nothing flashy, but when millions of people use the platform every day, even small tweaks can have massive impact. Now let me know how many of these changes have you noticed if you use Steam regularly. And honestly, this video is trying to summarize just a small slice of everything Valve covered in the Steam year in review. The full post goes into a lot more detail about things like developer analytics, tools, sales reporting, playtesting system, how Studio manages the store pages. So if you're even a little curious about how the platform actually works behind the scenes, it's a really interesting read. I'll leave a link to the full blog post in the description below, and I honestly encourage you to check it out for yourself, because even though it's technically written for developers, it gives a fascinating look at how Steam keeps evolving year after year. And I'd love to hear what stood out to you most from this report. Was it the hardware direction, all the new announcements we had this year for the hardware? Was it the changes to the Steam store itself? Or the tools Valve is building for developers? If you are a developer, I'd love to hear your input. Let me know down in the comments below. And if you enjoy content like this, covering Steam, Steam Deck, PC gaming, Steam machines, Steam hardware, everything happening around the platform, make sure to subscribe to the channel. If you enjoyed this video, consider leaving a like. There's a lot happening in the PC gaming space right now, and we'll be covering all of it here on this channel. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.